The moment someone says you're quiet in a room full of people, usually loud ones, there's this half second where you consider explaining yourself, and then you don't. You do the smile, maybe a half shrug, and then you go back to observing whatever was more interesting than justifying your silence to someone who probably wouldn't have listened to the answer anyway. That experience, it's not a quirk. There's actually an entire psychology behind it. Most people assume quietness is a volume problem. Like somewhere along the way, the quiet person just didn't get enough encouragement to speak up, and if you could only coax them out a little, they'd blossom into someone more comfortable, more present. This assumption is so common and so wrong that it almost deserves its own diagnosis. Jerome Kagan, a psychologist at Harvard, studied infant temperament, specifically a group he identified as high reactive. These were babies who cried harder, kicked more, and became visibly overwhelmed in response to new stimuli, a new face, sound, or environment. Their nervous systems were, from the very beginning, doing more processing with the same inputs than other infants. When Kagan followed these children forward into adolescence and then adulthood, a significant portion of them had become quieter, more inward people. Why was that? Well, their nervous systems were built to take in more, which makes the world, sensory-wise, emotionally, a louder place to occupy. So when you see someone at a gathering who's barely speaking, who looks like they're doing mental calculus instead of having fun, they might actually be experiencing that room at an abnormally high resolution than everyone cheerfully shouting over the music. Because the world wasn't built for high resolution. The world rewards throughput. More words, faster, now, fill the silence before it gets weird. Quiet people spend a ton of energy in social settings managing the gap between what they take in and what feels worth saying. By the way, that gap is where a lot of the quiet person's private comedy lives. The fully formed response, developed in real time, then abandoned because the moment passed and someone else already said the obvious thing and got the laugh, and the quiet person is just sitting there, holding this unexploded thought with nowhere to put it. Sometimes they text it to one person later, at like 11 p.m. That person thinks they're the funniest human alive, but nobody at the party will ever know. It's a particular kind of loneliness, being funny in a way that's invisible. And here's what happens over time. Quiet people often grow up absorbing a particular message from the world around them. Report cards mention it. Parents worry about it in that careful yet concerned way that still communicates something is wrong. Relatives at holidays treat it like a problem to be solved with enough questions, as if the right one, delivered with enough enthusiasm, will finally crack something open. The accumulated message, received over years of gentle correction, you're taught that your natural inner state is somehow less than what's performed outwardly. So a lot of quiet people stop being only quiet, and also become private. Those are different things. Quiet is a volume setting. Private is something that happens after enough people treated your thoughts like a novelty act instead of a conversation. It's a boundary that nobody consciously chose, but arrived at, the way calluses form. What almost nobody sees, and this should genuinely bother us, is that quiet people are very often the most attentive people in the room, not nodding along while building their next sentence, actually listening the way people used to before everyone got addicted to being heard. They tracked the thing you said 20 minutes ago that contradicts what you just said now, noticed when your voice shifted. They caught the moment you glossed over something quickly, which usually means it mattered. Meetings are a particular kind of case study here. Someone is saying something that could have been an email, the quiet person figured that out within the first 40 seconds, has already identified the actual decision that needs to be made, and is now watching 3 other people talk around it in real time. They probably won't say anything, since the room isn't asking. The strange cruelty is that these are the people most often described as distant. Okay, something worth slowing down for. What happens when a quiet person actually decides to speak? When something has crossed whatever internal threshold exists between "I'll keep this to myself" and "this needs to be said." Those words tend to land differently than words from someone who talks constantly. Not always, but often enough that the people around them notice, even if they couldn't explain why. It's because those words have been lived in for a while before they were released. They already know exactly what they mean before they say it, and the precision of that, even if they'd never call it precision, is a rarer quality than we've collectively decided to value. Getting close to a quiet person, real close, takes patience that most people don't come with naturally. The early stages of any relationship carry this particular weight for them where they can feel someone trying to understand them through conversation, and they're watching the gap between what others see and what's actually there, wanting to close it but not knowing how to share their interior without it feeling like too much too fast. Some people never get let all the way in, and they of course know this. They count the people who got through on one hand usually, and they hold on to them with something that could be generously called loyalty and more accurately called relief. There's also the matter of how quiet people handle their own inner weather, grief, frustration, the occasional moment of joy that catches them off guard, which tends to linger on longer than they'd ever let on. Feelings don't get processed outward for them. They get dissolved slowly, the way sediment settles, which means the people in their lives often have no real idea what's happening inside them. And not because the quiet person is deliberately withholding, it's that the interior experience doesn't always have a direct translation into language, and they stopped trying to force it into words a long time ago. They constantly carry the gap between what they feel and what goes unspoken, quietly, the way they carry most things. None of this is shyness exactly, though shyness can absolutely live alongside it. It's a different relationship with language altogether, one where words carry weight, where saying something thoughtless feels physically uncomfortable. The social pressure to fill silence just to make everyone else less awkward seems genuinely bizarre. Why would you say something just to say it? That question probably feels obvious to you, and to someone else, it sounds like a statement from a different planet. Actually, it says something worth sitting with. There are two different ways of moving through social reality, and we've decided, without much discussion, that one of them is the default, and one of them is the deviation. The loud one got to set the standard. The quiet one has been gently failing it ever since. Quiet people aren't waiting to become more talkative. They're not a project. Most of them are doing something constantly that looks like nothing from the outside, carrying full conversations in their heads, processing the texture of their own experience with a level of attention that regular small talk genuinely cannot hold. And maybe that's what matters most here. The next time you're in a room with someone who isn't saying much, don't rush to fill it. Don't make it a thing. Just stay in the silence for a moment. See what it feels like. They'll notice. They always do. One last thing, and I only mention things I think people here would genuinely get value from. There's a link in the description to a set of 7-day guides built around things a lot of quiet, inward people tend to struggle with privately. Stuff like mental overstimulation, constant background noise in your head, rebuilding focus, fixing your sleep schedule, and pulling yourself out of that state where your brain never really feels settled. They're structured around small daily actions instead of just more information to consume, which honestly matters more than most people realize. If that sounds useful, it's in the description and pinned comment. And if you enjoyed this video, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss future uploads.